I have some very clear views on writing and whether we need to teach people how to write or whether that should be a curricular task, skill if you wish. And if it is, then how can we go about teaching writing and so forth. I have some clear views on those, and they are not all in conformity with what we've been told about writing and the teaching of writing. To take them one by one, of course, there is the basic question whether everyone needs to be taught how to write. And the only reason, as far as I can see, that belief derives some strength. And the only reason why people believe that writing is an inevitable part of teaching and learning a language is that we reduce the learning of a language to that magic formula LSRW, and W has to be paid obeisance to, and therefore how can you not teach writing? That is what people tend to believe. But I would like all teachers, and all teachers have very little say, do they? I mean, it's they are supposed to run through the syllabus, through the textbook, and so forth. But who sits and designs these syllabi and compiles textbooks, etc., should perhaps ask themselves this question whether writing has to be taught at all during the early phases of learning a language. And if they're honest to themselves, they'll very clearly answer that question with a no. I mean, there is absolutely no need for writing to come into early and intermediate stage language learning. If at all we need to introduce writing, it has to be at the advanced stage of, let's say, 10th class, 11th class, etc. Why do I say that? That's because hardly any of our learners, earlier I was talking broadly about language learning. If we want to narrow it down to English language learning, I would say very few of our learners in India actually need to write anything at all in English. And if that truth makes us uncomfortable as teachers of English and syllabus makers of English, then if we go through that uncomfortable phase for a while, even as we question ourselves, then we'll realize that, well, it's just years and years of unquestioned acceptance of LSRW that makes us say that. And if we are honest to ourselves, we'll realize that no, writing is perhaps not required at all. What is required, I would say, well, before I come to that, let me say the minimal role for writing I see in the teaching of and learning of English in India. And that is, the very obvious role of the what I call templated writing, that is the CVs and resumes and cover letters and job applications and all that, where you have, particularly if you have an MS Office or Apple Pages loaded onto your computer, it is actually a template you are filling with. You remove John Smith and put Balagopal there, that's it. But even so, if you want to do any kind of training there, yes, there is some sense in having that kind of training, because you're preparing yourself for the world, applying for jobs and whatnot. The other kind of writing that I would minimally bring in during the later stages of the learning of English in India would be the what I now call citizen writing. I'm borrowing a term from citizen journalism, where with the advent of the mobile phone and easy recording devices, almost everyone can turn into a journalist or a news contributor now. In the same spirit, almost everyone can, because there is a platform on which one can publish one's own writing. Almost everyone can write anything, and that is not just a facetious kind of statement, but also something that's actually happening now. With a lot of people taking to writing seriously, and I don't mean just the 140 character tweet or the rather superficial Facebook post, if it's called that, or the Facebook wall or whatever. I don't subscribe to either of these, so I'm not very familiar with the jargon, but that is not the kind of writing I have in mind when I talk about citizen writing. It's the really serious kind of writing. You could call it blog posts if you wish, but the kind of writing that you see increasingly around you, because people have lots of things to say and they want other people to read these things, and mercifully now all of them have a platform that they can make themselves heard on. And that word heard is important, because I actually see writing of that kind as actually speaking on paper. And therefore, if I speak, then someone has to hear me rather than read me. But that's, of course, a different point. Coming back to the role of writing in the learning of English in India, I'd say keep writing for the very advanced stages of this process. And at those stages, divide writing into the very business writing that I was talking about earlier, calling it template writing, and the other kind of citizen writing that people can do on their own, with or without jobs, etc., and get the world to read what they have to write about. That kind of, so at the later stages, I would like teachers and the system to divide people, stream people into people who want to just do the business kind of writing and people who want to do the citizen writing. In fact, if you don't want to stream a group of learners, divide them, etc., actually there is no harm in doing that, because you're only asking them what your purpose is. And if some people say, I want to apply for jobs, fine. And the others say, well, I have some interesting things to tell the world, and I'd like to write that kind of thing. The streaming is very logical and doesn't hurt anyone.